people are coming at this conversation two different ways. You know, from your perspective, as you mentioned, you're a national firm, you know, you have offices in Philadelphia. As you know well, there are a lot of governments and organizations and chambers and business groups and individuals who see the technology growth in these non-traditional markets as an economic development conversation, of an attract and retain conversation. Are different cities competing with each other for those attract retain conversations? Is that misguided or small-minded about the opportunity that we have? You know, where do you see when someone comes to you and says, we want to compete with whatever other non-traditional market for talent or companies or ideas?
So I'm not sure it's a zero-sum game, and at least for me, when I'm looking at these non-traditional hubs, like a Philadelphia, I don't think the challenge is actually attracting entrepreneurs. I think it's very hard for a non-traditional hub to pull an entrepreneur and a company from another non-traditional hub, because you're competing at that point with the Valley or New York. Take a look at Philadelphia. I don't think Philadelphia's challenge is attracting great entrepreneurs. I think they have a magnet for great entrepreneurs, the university system. You know, our office here is just blocks away from Penn and Wharton. And in the last 6 years, we've seen companies like AdMob get their start here. They sold to Google for $750 million. Invite Media got its start here, sold to Google for $80 million. Milo got its start here, sold to eBay for $100 million. Warby Parker got its start here, and they're just crushing it in New York. So all of those companies got their start right here. The challenge has been that they all left. So I don't think that the challenge for alternative sort of tech scenes, non-core tech markets, is attracting entrepreneurs. I think the challenge is retaining them.
Tomorrow you're king of Philadelphia or king of any non-traditional market. What is step one that you would want to look to kind of growing those entrepreneurs that you mentioned? And if that's the case, what happens over the next 5 to 10 years in any of those markets?
Look, I don't think that this is something that can be, again, solved by edict or proclamation. All it takes is you want to create an environment where people are free to create. The friction to get something is low. So if you're a regional government, you want to make sure there's very low friction to start a company, to get started. You want to make sure there's seed capital there, because oftentimes that first investment is the hardest investment to get. In Philadelphia, for example, the administration teamed up with their local PIDC, their Industrial Development Corporation, to create Startup PHL, which is a seed fund dedicated to funding technology companies in the city. So trying to create more access to seed capital. And then it's up to the market to really build it from there.
Right. What do you think is not being asked or talked about in this conversation that should be? You know, in the idea of non-traditional hubs, is there something that you think is being missed?
No, I think great entrepreneurs exist all over our country. And there are some times where there are great reasons for them to move to a traditional hub, but there are also some times where certain companies can actually succeed and thrive in non-traditional hubs as well. I think that the success of Philly or the success of any ecosystem is going to be based very simply on one thing: the success of the companies that are there. We have a whole new batch of companies here in Philly that have just gotten funded. We have a bunch of companies that have raised growth capital, right? So whether it's Monetate, where we're an investor, which now has grown from 2 people working in our office to over 200 employees by the end of this year. And if Monetate is successful, I expect you're going to see 50 of their employees might become angel investors, mentors, advisors, or founders of the next group of companies. And that's what it's really going to take. You look at a company like Curelate, which is just sort of, at a real period of growth, growing from 2 employees to 15 or 20 employees. And if they're able to succeed, they're going to create the next batch of entrepreneurs, angel investors, mentors, board members. And that's what it's going to take for Philadelphia to continue to grow. And for all non-traditional ecosystems, it just takes those companies to succeed. It doesn't take so many. It just takes 1 or 2 big successes to really begin to get the flywheel started. When it comes to what keeps companies in a place, I think that there's a natural size at which companies are willing to leave. 2 employees, company is very portable. 5 employees, company gets portable. But look at me, I didn't grow up in Philadelphia. I grew up in New York. I came to college here. And by the time I graduated college, I had 15 to 20 employees. Now, I wasn't tied to the Philadelphia region. I probably originally would have moved to California. But my employees had husbands and wives and kids in school and family nearby and boyfriends and girlfriends. And I think sort of once a company gets above 15 to 20 employees, it becomes a far more challenging conversation to relocate. So oftentimes when I'm talking to people about what does it take for a city or an ecosystem to help these companies grow, most of the players in traditional ecosystems are focused on funding the larger companies, focused on retaining the larger companies. How do I keep a company that has an employee base of 100 employees or 200 employees here? But for me, I think the real sweet spot and key question is between the 2 and 15 employees. Because if you're able to keep the companies here when they grow from 2 employees to 15 employees, it gets a lot harder for them to move. Now, sometimes they do, and sometimes there are reasons for them to. I believe that there are very good reasons for certain companies to move to certain ecosystems. But if you're asking what keeps companies here, it's their employees.